every day that coming June 12th meeting in Singapore between President Trump and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un seems to bring with it some more uncertainty, and today is no different. Washington and Pyongyang have issued contradictory statements about the summit's conditions and its aims, and both keep raising doubts that it might happen at all, including Trump just minutes ago. He spoke earlier in the Oval Office at that meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in, doing little to settle any concerns or bring about some clarity. Watch.
Well, we're moving along, and we'll see what happens. There are certain conditions that we want, and I think we'll get those conditions. And if we don't have the meeting. And frankly, it has a chance to be a great, great meeting for North Korea and a great meeting for the world. If it doesn't happen, maybe it'll happen later. Maybe it'll happen at a different time. But we will see.
Well, joining us from New York now is Howard Stoffer, Associate Professor of National Security at the University of New Haven. And Howard, President Trump sounding now very uncertain about if the meeting is going to happen on the June 12th date. Is this brinksmanship or just confusion in the Oval Office?
It may be both. I think Trump is backtracking because the North backtracked when they said, oh, we're not going to give up all our nuclear weapons on the Libya model. And so now Trump doesn't want to appear to be too anxious for this meeting. And so his statement today is backtracking, and it's kind of giving him the option, well, I may not go, and we may do it at a later date. So I think that's what's going on the American side. On the North Korean side, we don't know.
Howard, do you think those mixed messages are useful for maybe the leverage, for a negotiating tactic when going into that summit, or just complicate it?
Well, I think it is a form of leverage. Basically, President Trump is saying, I don't need to be there. I'm going to be offering things that will make the North very happy. If they don't want to come, and they don't come on our terms, and I'm not sure exactly what those terms might be, except there must be denuclearization on the table. How fast that happens is a big question. It's not going to be taking place when a C-5A flew into Tripoli and loaded up all the nuclear weapons that Gaddafi had and flew off. It's not going to be that model. It's going to have to be inspections. Denuclearization has to be deconstruction of missiles and nuclear warheads, and fissile materials slowly being taken out of the country, all under international inspection.
Howard, you mentioned that he's sort of trying to stray away from that Libyan model that the White House suggested earlier, and I think is trying to backtrack heavily from, since we all know Gaddafi's term didn't end so well. Even more, Trump saying today, we're going to guarantee Kim's safety. We're going to make the people there live very well. He's making a lot of promises on what the U.S. can provide. Do you think those are realistic promises?
No, I don't think they're realistic at all. I mean, the United States can, if we reach some kind of an agreement to have a long-term process of destroying the nuclear capability of the North, the United States could sign a peace treaty. The United States can reduce its troop presence in South Korea. The United States can limit the number of exercises it has with South Korea. And there are many other things. On the DMZ, we can limit the number of troops that we have and the military forces we have arrayed with weapons on that border, as long as the North does the same. There are many confidence-building measures that can be taken, but they need to be taken over a long period of time. This is not going to be a 1 or 2 year process. It's going to be something that could easily take to the end of the first term of President Trump, maybe longer, probably longer. And of course, this kind of statement by North Korea saying, well, we're not really sure now if we're going to denuclearize based on the model that John Bolton put forward, then I think this is very typical. The charm offensive ends, and the North Koreans go back to the old model of, well, we're really not going to do the things you expect us to do because they're not realistic. You Americans have an unrealistic attitude about what we are going to offer.
Now, China, of course, will be a key player in the talks between Trump and Kim. And yesterday, the president criticized the Chinese for not keeping their border with North Korea strong and tight and allowing goods into the country in violation of the U.S.'s tough sanction policy. Here's what the Chinese foreign minister said in an apparent response.
China had always fulfilled its international obligations. This is the first thing. Secondly, China and North Korea, as two friendly neighbors and under the premise of not violating each side's international obligations, have maintained normal contact, including trading ties. There is absolutely no inevitable contradiction between these two.
Howard, I want to ask you, President Trump criticizing China yesterday on apparently its border with North Korea, is that more about North Korea or more about these trade disputes that are going on right now between Washington and Beijing?
Well, you know, there's been a lot of reporting in the Western press, I mean, the United States and European press, Japanese press, South Korean press about sanctions being violated, UN sanctions, U.S. sanctions being violated as trade goes on across the North Korean-Chinese border. It hasn't been significant, but it's been allowing certain kind of industries, especially the fish industry, to sell goods to China on the other side of the border. And I think China is just keeping that valve open a little bit. They don't want it to be too tight. They want North Korea to be able to feel comfortable that they can go forward with a summit meeting with Trump and reach certain kinds of agreements. It's to their advantage, too. They want to see a North Korea that gets more prosperous, that's not so hair-trigger, that doesn't have nuclear weapons. So it's in their interest to see this summit meeting go forward. And I think letting a little bit of trade that might be sanctions violations go forward is not really related to trade with the United States. It's more related to just letting a little bit of pressure off the North Koreans.
Howard, we keep hearing about these two sort of parallel stories happening all the time. One is trade. Will there be a trade war or not between the U.S. and China? Lately, the U.S. says no. And that goal of denuclearization. Do those need to be a package deal?
I think they're two separate tracks. They can be interrelated, but they're really two separate tracks. As you saw in the New York Times today, the Trump administration's been all over the place regarding the trade arrangements. One person says, the Treasury Secretary says trade war is off. Another person says, Ludlow says 200 billion will be the amount that they will be buying in American goods in addition to what they did before. And then others, like the trade representative, says we're not anywhere near an agreement. So who knows what's going on? This is a very typical way Trump has negotiated real estate in New York, for example. As to whether the North will be a separate track, I think it will be a separate track. You know, trade with China really is not intimately related to denuclearizing the North and having a positive outcome where the North and South can have interest sections in each capital. The North may be able to open something in Washington, and we could open something in Pyongyang. And in addition, there could be a slow degrading of sanctions in return for a process, a phased, careful, laid-out process that will lead to destruction of missiles, nuclear warheads, and all of the capabilities for testing them.
All right, maybe the same deal-making strategy, but a very different negotiation, certainly a very different context in this case than any kind of real estate deal. Howard Stoffer in New York.